Good morning, folks. I want to talk to you today about something that happened last night, July the 16th, 2026, that I believe every American, regardless of party, ought to sit down and think about very carefully. Now look, I've given my share of primetime addresses from the White House. I know what it feels like to stand behind that podium knowing that every single word you say will echo through the country and across the world. You feel the weight of it. You feel the responsibility. And you understand, or at least you should understand, that the credibility of that office depends entirely on the honesty of the person behind the desk. Last night, a sitting president of the United States used that platform, the most powerful platform on earth, not to announce a breakthrough in diplomacy, not to rally the country around a common challenge, not to level with the American people the way a president sometimes must. He used it to cast doubt on the very electoral machinery of the republic he swore an oath to protect. He stood in the East Room and told the nation that our elections are catastrophically insecure, that China stole 220 million voter files, that voting machines are easily compromised, that a deep state covered it all up. And here's where it gets interesting, because the same administration that just told you the house is on fire, they spent the last 18 months ripping out the smoke detectors, firing the firefighters, and padlocking the exits. That is not a figure of speech. That is a documented, verifiable fact. What happened last night wasn't about security. It was about power. And the facts tell a very different story than the one that speech tried to sell you. To understand why last night was so troubling, you've got to understand how we built the election security infrastructure that existed before this administration took a wrecking ball to it. This was not a Democratic project. This was an American project. After the mess in Florida in 2000, Congress came together and passed the Help America Vote Act in 2002. George W. Bush signed it. It created the Election Assistance Commission and set the foundation for modernizing elections. Then in 2018, during Trump's first term, Congress created CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Trump himself appointed Chris Krebs to lead it. That system worked. After the 2020 election, Krebs, Trump's own appointee, called it the most secure in American history. The intelligence community's assessment concluded there was no evidence any foreign actor altered any technical aspect of the voting process. Now here's what's happened since January 2025. CISA has lost roughly a third of its workforce, about 1,000 people gone. Attorney General Pam Bondi dissolved the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force on her first day. Tulsi Gabbard gutted the Foreign Malign Influence Center. Secretary Rubio shut down the State Department's Counter Foreign Influence Office. And on July the 9th, 1 week before that speech, all 3 remaining Election Assistance Commission members were fired. You cannot credibly sound the alarm about a fire when you're the one who set it. Now, some of you are thinking, but what about those declassified documents? Fair question. Let me walk you through them. First, the claim that China acquired 220 million voter files. Much of that voter data is publicly available. States sell voter registration lists. In North Carolina and Ohio, you can download them for free. A joint CIS-AFBI bulletin from September 2020 acknowledged this. The documents contain no evidence China used any of that data to influence a single voter or alter any outcome. Second, the voting machine claims. The speech referenced Smartmatic and Venezuela, but Smartmatic machines are not used anywhere in the United States except Los Angeles County, and a CIA memo in that same declassified trove concluded Venezuela and Smartmatic lacked the capability to manipulate elections outside Venezuela. The president cited a document that contradicted his own argument. Third, non-citizen voting. Trump said DHS identified 278,000 non-citizens on voter rolls in 4 states, but provided no methodology. Iowa's Republican Secretary of State estimated 2,186 non-citizens registered. After audit, that dropped to 277. Only 35 had voted. And even John Solomon, the conservative columnist with the White House Post, reviewing these files, admitted on camera, the intelligence community has zero evidence that a foreign power flipped a vote in 2020, 2022, or 2024. That's Trump's own reviewer. Let me tell you something about primetime addresses. I gave them on matters of war, economic crisis, and national tragedy. You don't use that platform lightly. You certainly don't use it to relitigate a 5-year-old election fewer than 4 months before the midterms. What we saw last night was a president who dismantled the agencies built to protect elections, then used the resulting vulnerability to claim elections can't be trusted. Think about the paradox. This administration fired 1,000 CISA employees, dissolved the FBI unit tracking foreign influence, gutted the intelligence center monitoring threats, removed every commissioner from the EAC, and then said, our elections are catastrophically insecure. Whose fault is that? 3 major networks, ABC, NBC, and CNN, chose not to carry that speech on their primary channels. That reflects serious institutional concern about lending the presidential platform to claims already characterized as debunked or exaggerated. And Trump called for criminal investigations of intelligence officials who did their jobs honestly, including Chris Krebs, whom he himself appointed. The message is unmistakable. Tell the truth, and this administration may come after you. That's not how you build trust. That's how you destroy it. Think of election security the way you'd think about your body's immune system. Multiple layers, all working together to detect threats and keep the system healthy. If you systematically strip away every layer, then express shock that the body is getting sick, that's not a diagnosis. That's malpractice. Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes said his office is now effectively flying blind. Pennsylvania Secretary of State Al Schmidt warned that the rollback will have serious consequences heading into November. The Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center, gone. The Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, defunded. The Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Council, terminated. In 2023 and 2024, CISA conducted over 700 cybersecurity and nearly 1,300 physical security assessments for election stakeholders. Those services are now gone. Let me be direct about what last night's speech was designed to do. It wasn't about protecting your vote. It was about controlling who gets to cast one. The speech had three strategic objectives. First, building pressure to pass the Save America Act, requiring documentary proof of citizenship to register and effectively ending most mail-in voting. 21 million Americans lack ready access to the required documents. Half don't have a passport. Millions of married women who changed their names would face additional hurdles. This isn't security. This is suppression with a better brand name. Second, laying groundwork to contest the 2026 midterms. If the SAVE Act passes, millions of eligible voters get blocked. If it doesn't, and Republicans lose seats, the narrative is seeded. The election was stolen. Third, Trump himself voted by mail in a Florida special election this year, claiming, "I couldn't be there," while records showed he was at Mar-a-Lago playing golf. The hypocrisy is not subtle. Now let me look ahead. First, diplomatic fallout. Trump accused China of, quote, "the largest compromise of election data in history." China called it pure fabrication. When you weaponize intelligence domestically, you damage America's credibility with every country watching. With a reported Xi Jinping visit planned for September, this is reckless. Second, the chilling effect on public servants. When a president calls for investigating officials who gave honest assessments, every future analyst learns their security depends not on truth, but on telling the president what he wants to hear. Third, with federal support gutted, states face 2026 with weaker cybersecurity than at any point in the last decade. If something goes wrong, the speech has already written the explanation. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Fourth and most dangerous, a president repeatedly telling Americans their elections cannot be trusted, without evidence a single vote was changed, corrodes the shared belief that makes democracy possible. Let me close person to person. Democracy works through ordinary people doing extraordinary things, showing up, casting votes, counting ballots, and trusting the process, not because it's perfect, but because it's accountable and transparent. Is election security a legitimate concern? Of course. But there is a world of difference between genuine improvement and manufactured crisis, between fixing a vulnerability and inventing one to justify taking away people's right to vote. I've had the privilege of participating in democracy's most sacred ritual, the peaceful transfer of power. I handed the keys to George W. Bush because that is what the Constitution demands. The real danger is not a foreign adversary hacking our machines. Every serious review confirms that hasn't happened. The real danger is the erosion of our shared belief in democratic self-governance, carried out by the very people sworn to uphold it. But here's the hope. Bipartisan officials are pushing back. Fact checkers are doing their jobs. Courts have blocked overreach. Millions are paying attention. The system is not broken, but it is being tested harder than at any point in my lifetime. The test is whether Americans will defend the right of every citizen to cast the vote and have it counted. Pay attention. Stay engaged. Support your local election workers. And remember, the most powerful thing in a democracy is not a speech from the White House. It's the vote of an ordinary citizen. That's always been true, and as long as we defend it, it always will be. Thank you, and God bless America.